Hi, what's going on? My name is Anand. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can use HTTP API inside of Chatbot so that you can make API calls to fetch any information in real time. This is really helpful when you want to get any information in real time for a third party software and send the message to your customer. For example, a customer might ask you, hey, what is the gold rate right now? If you're a jeweler, they might ask something like that, right? So then you might want to use a API which can get you the real time gold rate and then respond back to the customer. Now, something like this can be easily integrated inside WhatChimp, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But first, like all my tutorials, I'm going to give you a fundamental knowledge about APIs, how it works, some of the examples, and then I'm going to quickly take you here and show you how you can create a new API. Also, I'm going to show you some of the repositories and places from where you can find out free real-time APIs so you don't have to pay for it, right? So let's just get to the fundamental first. So if we go to the fundamentals, this is how an API works, right? So this is you, this person is you, and you make an API call to any web application, right? So this is the web application to which you're going to make an API call. So whenever you're making an API call, you can see over here, this is an API call that we are making here. You get something in return, right? So you got something here in return. So the reason why we made an API call is to get back that information. Like I just explained, if you want to know what's the gold rate right now, you want to make an API call to a web app, to a software, to anything that exists which accepts the API call, and the web application is going to return you the information that you're looking for. But for you to get the right information along with your API call, you also have to feed some data. So this, what you see over here, is the data, right? Now, why is it important? Because let's say you want to get the current gold rate, right? So if you're looking to get the current gold rate, now you want to tell the software in which currency do you want to get that current gold rate. Is it in US dollars? Is it in Indian rupees? What exactly is the currency? So you will have to give more context about the request that you have made. Plus, you might also want to verify yourself that, hey, this request is coming from an authorized person, because this web app is only going to respond to people who are authorized to make this API call. So the data contains all that information. It contains that authorization key. It contains the context about your request so that it can provide you the right information in return. Right? Now let's take an example to understand this very quickly. So let's say you want to fetch the weather details. So for you to fetch weather details, you need a web app which can give you that information. So you need to make an API call to that web app. This is, you can see over here, this is where we are making an API call. And then the web app is going to return you the details of that weather. But to fetch the weather details, we have to provide the location, right? Which locations weather do we want to fetch? So the data over here which we are providing is the location, right? So here I'm telling that I want to get the weather details of Mumbai or New York or whatever city, region, whatever it is. I have to give that information to the web app. So this is how you make an API call and set the context about the API call that you're making right now. Let's take in one more example, which was the gold rate. So when you want to fetch a gold rate, what you want to do is you want to make an API call. With that, you also want to provide that I want to get the result in form of US dollars, right? So you want to provide that currency, that, hey, the currency equals to US dollars. I want to get US dollar. I want to get the conversion, the gold rate in US dollars, right? And then it's going to give you that information to you. Now, I hope you understood the basic concept of how how the APIs work, right? It's pretty easy, pretty simple. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a repository. So this is a repository called as apifeni.io. There's plenty of such repository that you can find on internet, you can see over here there are 90 plus public APIs for testing, which does not need any authorization, which means you don't need to authorize yourself to make an API call. Otherwise, most of the API needs an authorization. You need to get an API key to make that API call, right? So if you see over here, these are the APIs where you don't need any authorization and you can quickly make an API call. So there's an API to get a list of any or all public APIs currently cataloged in the project, right? So if you want to get all the free APIs endpoint, then you can make this API call. If you want to get random facts about cat, you can make this API call. If you want to see the Bitcoin price index in real time, you can make this API call. So let's just go to this link, make this API call and see what exactly are we getting, right? So if I have to make an API call, I'm going to just click on this and it's going to show me the JSON. Now, the reason why it immediately gave me the data is because this is an API call which does not need any authorization. In some cases, you might also want to provide an API key as well, right? So these APIs do not need anything. That's why I'm getting the information. And the information that I'm getting, it's in a format of JSON. So if I want to see this information in a neat way, then I can use something called as JSON formatter, right? So if I go to JSON formatter and I take that information and I paste it over here and then I click format, you can see this is how we are getting this, right? So it's telling me that the Bitcoin currently on the day 11 December 2 a.m. it cost $96,000, $96,779, right? That's the price of Bitcoin in US dollars, in GBP, in euros. You can see all that over here, right? You can see the real-time pricing with the help of this API, right? So we can use HTTP API to make that API call, fetch that information, and then send it back to the customer that, hey, this is what we collected, and you can do whatever you want with that information. All right. So now what we need to do is we need to make a chatbot that can make one of these API calls and then send that information back to the customers. So what I am planning to use is something called as genderize.io, which gives you the gender of the person based on the name. So if you provide a name, let's just go to this API. So if you provide a name, let's say the name is LUC, it says it's a male, right? Let's try something as Emily. So if I do Emily, it's going to tell me that, hey, the gender is female. So I'm going to use a very simple API and see what we are getting. And so what we'll do is we'll collect the information like name from the user, and then we'll make this API call and then tell them whether the gender is male or a female. Okay, very simple to use. So I've already created a workflow for this. If you see over here, the chatbot will be fired when somebody sends a message as find gender, right? That's the keyword when the chatbot will be fired. Whenever someone does that, we need to collect information. So I have created a user input flow. If you want to know more about user input flow, you can check out the video in the YouTube channel. But here I have created a new input flow campaign where I'm collecting the gender details, right? So here you can see I'm collecting the gender details. So what I need is just the name, right? So I'm collecting the name and I'm storing that in the custom field name. And then once I get it, I send a message, hey, we are fetching the text. And then we need to make an API call. So I need to click over here and then click here, and then I need to create a new API because this does not already exist. So I need to go ahead and create an API call. So when I click on this, it's going to take me to this page. This is the page that we'll get, right? Let me just click that so that you know what page we are going to right now. Okay, so this is the page where we go. Now what we need to do is you need to create a new API. So this is where it's asking me for the API name. So let's do fetch gender, and the endpoint URL we already have it handy. So this is the endpoint URL, but over here instead of Emily, we want to provide a dynamic value, right? The value which we are fetching from the customer. So here the customer is giving that value in the form of name, right? So what we are collecting from the customer, it's the name, right? So we want to provide that name as a variable over here. So you can click here and then you can pick that name. So I got the name from here. So I'm going to copy this and paste over here. And we need to make a get request. So this API request is a get method. So we are making a get request. How do I know this? It should be written in the documentation, right? So for the documentation of genderize.io, it was written that it's a get request. That's why we are making a get request. So if I'm making get request, and now here I'm giving the endpoint URL, and then here I have to give a test subscriber ID. So I already have one subscriber ID handy with me. So I'm just going to provide the test subscriber ID over here. This is the ID of any of your subscribers so that you can test the API call. So I'm going to put one of the API, one of the subscribers ID over here. That's it. And you need to verify the connection. So just click on verify connection and let's see what we are getting. Okay. So we are getting, so we got count, we got gender as male, we got name as Anant, and the probability as 1, right? Now we have to map this field with something. So this field has to be mapped with gender. Gender is a field which I already created, so I don't have to do that. But in case it's not created in your case, what you need to do is go to your subscriber manager and create gender as a, let's go to the subscriber manager. And then this is where you have to click on manage custom field. And this is where you have to create that field so that whenever you collect that information, you're able to store it somewhere. So this custom field was already created by me. Gender, you can see gender was already created, so I'm not creating it again. So the value that I got here, gender, I'm going to map this and click on save API. Okay, so it is saved, all set. Perfect. So you can see the gender API is now created. Now what we need to do is go back to the flow and click on refresh so that we can fetch the gender API. Okay, we got this. Click over here, click on save, and then, so I'm going to click on text and send a message as, let's say the names, gender is, and then whatever is the gender, let's just give that. So let's find out the gender. Where is the gender? Yeah, this is the one. Save it and save. Cool. So now let's just go ahead and test it, right? So this chatbot will fire when somebody sends a message, find gender. So the message that we need to send is find gender. The moment you send that, it's asking for me for the name. Let's say Emily. Fetching gender. Emily's gender is female, right? Now you can do that one more time. Find gender. Anant. Fetching gender, and Anant's gender is male, right? How cool is this? So this way you can fetch real-time information using the HTTP API and send it immediately to your customers on automation. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, drop it down in the comment below. I'll be happy to answer, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.